Local productions seen on Delta College Public Media are made possible with support from viewers like you. Thank you.
Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Mike Redford, and this is the follow-up. Coming up on tonight's show, DeepSeek, ChatGPT, and the Stargate Project. If those terms don't mean anything to you now, they will after this show, I can tell you that. It's all about AI, artificial intelligence, innovative technology moving at warp speed. Tonight, we have two people who work in the front lines of AI to help you better understand it, its benefits to you, and what you need to watch out for. But first, we have viewer feedback from last week's show here on the follow-up. We focused on the Great Lakes Bay Mental Health Partnership and the need for more of us to recognize the signs and symptoms of someone who may be having mental health challenges and not being afraid to intervene in a caring and compassionate way to encourage them to seek help. Here's what one viewer had to say who dialed into our follow-up hotline.
My name's Dave, and I'm in Hale, Michigan. And during my hardship, I had a church, and they sent me a letter, and it really helped me out knowing that somebody out there was really wanting to express their theories and so on, that somebody that cares. You know, they don't really need to know what the problem is, other than, you know, just a little cheer up once in a while through the mail. And I think it kind of helps. So thank you very much for your time.
And thank you for your time. Appreciate the phone call. We'd like to hear from more of you to help drive the conversation here on the follow-up. You can do that in a variety of ways via social media on Facebook. You can email us. You can dial into our follow-up hotline that viewer just did. And if you'd like to watch any of our past shows this season, you can log on to deltapublicmedia.org. Now for tonight's show, joining us live virtually, Timothy Bates, professor at the University of Michigan-Flint in the College of Innovation and Technology, also known as the Godfather of Tech. More about that later in the show. Good to see you, Tim. And joining us in the studio a second time, Nick Gaspar, also a professor at the University of Michigan-Flint, Director of Online and Digital Education and Adjunct Lecturer in the School of Nursing. Quite a title there. So, well, everyone's talking about AI, but a lot of us don't fully understand it and how it impacts all of us personally. Innovation's constantly evolving, right? And we have a little simple definition to show the viewers about AI and kind of what the definition is about, why we talk. So tonight we're going to kind of dumb it down a bit. Hate to say that, but breaking it down in three areas, helping us to better understand the DeepSeek, the ChatGPT, Stargate Project, how it's evolving with the work you do at University of Michigan-Flint, and where the U.S. stacks up in AI development compared to other countries like China, for example, who seem to be moving a lot faster than we are. So let's start with DeepSeek. Some have called it a game changer in the world of AI, and it should be a wake-up call to us in the U.S. Who wants to take that first?
Yeah, it's definitely been a wake-up call, and it's a reminder that the United States is not the only player in the game. The story of DeepSeek seems to be the story of necessity is the mother of all invention. So they're the newest player on the scene. They're a Chinese company, Chinese startup, have a product by the same name, DeepSeek AI. And they were born out of this necessity to innovate without access to the latest in infrastructure and hardware. The United States had embargoed the latest GPUs and chips that are needed to train AIs. And so this company out of China, they devised a way to be innovative and think about how to, some alternative methods to train artificial intelligence systems and to be able to do it far more efficiently on much older hardware.
And Tim, I think you can follow up with a little bit more as well. You mentioned in one of your blog posts that I read that there was a DeepSeek oops moment. So what do you mean by that, that oops moment?
Well, the oops moment is really based on hardware and efficiencies. DeepSeek, like we just mentioned, that they thought that they were embargoed by the hardware and they had to do more with less. And from that standpoint, they were able to use the older hardware, the older NVIDIA GPUs in order to pull out exactly what OpenAI did with billions of dollars. They did it within a few $1 million. And from that standpoint, it's kind of like explaining from a standpoint, taking the white pages or the yellow pages, a big book of information and trying to digitize it. OpenAI did that by boiling the ocean. DeepSeek took that same information from OpenAI and made it use it more efficiently from that standpoint. So OpenAI did the real work, but DeepSeek took it to the next level. And then within DeepSeek, they actually made it think a little bit differently than what OpenAI is doing. OpenAI likes to boil the ocean with multiple different agents. I would call them agents inside of their AI. But with DeepSeek, they basically said instead of sending it to multiple different individual agents inside your AI, let's tune you and tweak you to a point where you're actually going directly to the point of what we actually to do the research. And so that's the aha moment from a DeepSeek standpoint, and the efficiencies that they were able to pull out of their AI over what we've done here in the United States.
So DeepSeek's sort of the new kid on the block. So who's the next new kid on the block? It's always something else coming, right? I mean,
Yeah, well, you already have a couple. Who's that? I can't even remember all the different names, but a couple have already dropped. Stanford just a week ago or last week announced that they programmed a new model for $50. And then you have Alibaba, who also released their model 2 days after DeepSeek. So there's going to be a whole bunch more coming from other countries in the next 12 months.
so let's segue into like a definition perspective on ChatGPT, which we talked about a while ago. Now Stargate project has come. That's the sort of multi-billion-dollar investment that all these companies are making. It was probably in the first couple of days of the Trump administration. All this money that's out there, the Stargate project, and all the things it's supposed to do. So,
Yep.
what's the backstory on that?
So with Stargate, it's been around for a little while, several months now. They're already under development, but it's essentially a partnership between OpenAI, SoftBank, finance company out of Japan, and MGX, which is another finance company out of Abu Dhabi. And essentially what they're doing is, like you mentioned, they're pulling together in the first year $100 billion to invest in AI infrastructure. And then over the next 4 years, there'll be an additional $400 billion for a $500 billion total. And they're also going to, so what's going to end up happening, it's kind of twofold here. So you have OpenAI, SoftBank, and MGX. They're taking care of the financial side of the house. But then you also have OpenAI along with like Microsoft, NVIDIA, and Oracle, also ARM, taking care of the infrastructure side of the house. So see, these are the two pathways they're going to use to spend $500 billion right now.
Okay. I don't know if you can add to that, Tim, but one thing I was going to mention is the U.S. trailing in AI technology because maybe we're putting too many controls and caps on it, possibly creating too much of a fear about it, or we've gotten past that. But is that sort of creating this fear? The Chinas and these other Asian countries are sort of getting ahead of us. I mean, DeepSeek's an example of that, I guess.
Well, I wouldn't say the fear is, yes, they're getting ahead of us. But the thing is I don't think there's any way that we can really control it. It's one of the things that happened with DeepSeek and why they released AI out to the open source. It wasn't to put a threat against the United States or anyone from that standpoint. It was to put AI back in the hands of the open community so that it would grow at the speed that it's starting to grow right now. Now, is that a problem for us in the long run? That's to be determined. I don't know what the Stargate program is really going to do for us, except start another war, if that makes any sense. But from that standpoint, we've already proven that it's just not going to take that kind of money to do the research. And that's where you're going to see a lot of other third world countries who's gotten access to the open source. They're going to end up, innovating and using that same source code to outpass some of the things that we see that are going on in China, as well as in Taiwan or anywhere else that's going on today.
Yeah, if I could add to that, I agree. Like, I don't really think we're falling behind. In fact, well, not in fact, but like it's thought that the people that built DeepSeek may have used ChatGPT to help model some of their own data. So that technology, like our technology, is being used to advance their own technology, and those systems are sort of working together to advance. But there are implications on both the Project Stargate and DeepSeek revelations, and that's so these systems are way more efficient now. Also their reasoning, which is another thing we can talk about. But it draws the question, if we need 50 times less processing power and 50 times less electricity, do we need these giant data centers now? And that's why you saw, if you pay attention to the markets, NVIDIA lost $500 billion in a day. And then, remember, that's an entire Project Stargate in one day. But they have since been clawing that back. in that time. And I think because in the short term, right, in the short term it's, oh my gosh, we don't need these data centers. But if you're familiar with something called Jevons paradox, basically as efficiency grows, the usage scales with it.
Right.
A classic example would be like fuel efficiency in cars. Right, the cars in the 70s weren't as fuel efficient. We're more efficient now, but yet we're not saving as much gas because we drive more. It's cheaper. But another way to think about it is like if you take pictures with a camera, like your old disposable or old film cameras, you had 12 shots or whatever it was. Mm-hmm. You had to be real intentional about how you use those. But now with the advent of cell phones, you can take as many pictures as you want all the time. And so that the idea is as those resources become more efficient, it's all going to get integrated in everything we do, and then we just use it more. And so in the end, we might need those data centers, or we might need that nuclear energy, which those stocks also took a hit when DeepSeek was released.
So it leads me in sort of this obvious question, the implications for the average person out there, somebody who may be watching tonight, kind of what we need to know. We have a little bit of a graphic out there that shows sort of the most popular uses of AI, and I'm sure there are many more uses for it. I think you guys can see some of that.
Yep.
Autonomous vehicles, chatbots, so on and so forth. I mentioned you guys earlier, my 3 adult kids are using AI in some way, shape, or form. But how do you kind of communicate that to the average person out there? You guys are real smart. You're in the middle of this. You do this stuff every day. How do you help folks kind of better understand, educate themselves, inform them, and say, here's the best way for you guys to kind of figure it out in your day-to-day usage of it?
Yeah, as far as the day-to-day and how the everyday person is going to be impacted by this, the idea is that it's going to be a new marketplace of innovation. So we're going to see new tools and new applications every single day because these models are more efficient now. But we're already seeing it. Like for those of you that use ChatGPT regularly, DeepSeek, because it was essentially free for their most advanced models, it forced ChatGPT or OpenAI to release their own models that are the most advanced for very cheap or free to everybody just to keep up.
Yeah, Tim, I have to ask you, and I'll get to this because I mentioned this at the beginning of the show. You've been called the godfather of tech. You've got a website, godfather.com, and you've got a book out there that I guess the goal of the book is somewhat to inform, educate people a little bit. There's the book cover right there. Yeah. Do you want to talk about the Godfather of Tech and what the book's about and how that can help us all kind of understand what we're talking about a little bit?
Yeah, well, the Godfather of Tech came from some kids' podcast that basically I was on just like this, and basically it kind of called me the Godfather of AI, and mainly because of all the different areas and the careers I've had in technology over the 40 years that I've been in the industry, and that's where it came from. But from that standpoint, it kind of just stuck. Every time I go down to Black Tech Saturdays or anywhere in the city, that kind of pops up. So I kind of said, well, why don't I go with it? Now, for the book, the reason I wrote the book is mainly not to basically become an author, but to basically get people to understand that a lot of people are complaining about AI. They don't know exactly what it is, how it works, how it's going to impact them, how they can use it in their everyday lives. So I decided, why not create a book like we had the book for dummies that would actually explain in very simple terms on what prompt engineering is and how to use prompt engineering in your everyday life from that standpoint. You can be a at-home mom teaching your kids, working from instead of going to school, homeschooling, and you can use AI. You can use AI to help you basically, determine different projects that you have around the house to help you fix them. One time I had guys come out to paint my house. My house is made out of ephes. Ephes is very unique, but they didn't know how to paint the ephes, so I pulled up AI and it gave me a complete step-by-step instructional layout in order how to paint the ephes on my house. Now, the funny part, or the best part about it, is that they only spoke Spanish, so I was able to translate it with AI into Spanish, and they were able to understand exactly how to paint my house. And so that's kind of one simple way of how an average person will be able to use AI in their everyday use life.
That's a good explanation. And you can get it on Amazon, by the way. I'm just going to pitch that a little bit more for you.
Yeah. Like I said, it's very short, but it's straight to the point. It doesn't get into all the high things around machine learning and everything else, because that's for a scientist. The average person just wants to know, how do I use PowerPoint? And that's what the book is. How do you use the LLM in your everyday life?
All right. Nick, I'm going to come over to you and talk a little bit about the work you're doing at the University of Michigan-Flint. We had you on about a year ago.
Yeah.
And you guys did a great job explaining it, but we were sort of just, the word isn't dumbing it down, but we seemed like we were just starting very simply explaining this term to folks. It had been out there a lot longer, but the average public was still kind of getting used to it. Right. So fast forward to a year. Yeah. Tell me what's happening
over there. It's a really exciting time in higher education right now, especially at the University of Michigan, at all the campuses, including Flint. I like to think that we're trying to be a lot more AI forward and thoughtful. And I think we're building a culture that embraces that right now. So we have all sorts of, I'm doing a lot of talks these days explaining how to integrate into teaching and learning. But the first thing I thought I should mention is I've been talking to students. And I survey the students when, every time I talk to them, I have a QR code, tell me how you're using it, give me your comments. And what I found is about 20%, so 20% of the students I've talked to, a couple hundred students now, 20% aren't really using it yet, which is okay. I think that number will shrink as we go. About 50% are using it just when they need it. They go over to ChatGPT or Advanced Voice and ask it a question. But the remainder about 30% or so, are using it either every day or are power users, which I found pretty interesting amongst our students that I've been talking to. But what's even more interesting, I think, is how they are using it. I always ask them, like, all right, what's going on right now? And a lot of students, kind of like you put up in the graphic, they're using it to learn new skills. They're using it to get creative ideas. One student even told me they use the art. They use picture generation to figure out, what do I want to draw next, kind of thing. Yep. But I also asked them, what are their fears? What are they worried about right now in terms of this? Because this is a big shift in our society. A lot of students will talk about, like, the sentience, right? We don't want these things to start guessing the launch codes, right? Anything like that. But every time I give a talk, what I hear the most, the question they ask me is, am I going to have a job when I graduate? And I'll tell you what I tell them. AI at this point, as we record this today, it's really not advanced enough to just take anybody's job if it wants to. There's maybe some niche areas right now where it can reduce the workforce, but where it can have an impact is those that are not embracing it or understanding it. It's the person who understands how to use AI in their work will replace those that do not. And I also tend to think it'll be their job and 2 other jobs is usually how it's going to go, because it just makes you more efficient right now. So I usually use that as a segue for our students to plug our AI literacy course that we have at the university. It's a course that I've developed. It's free for everybody, the entire general public, all the students at the University of Michigan. I've got about 2,000 people enrolled right now from across the nation. And it really, what it tries to do is just get you to understand what this is and how to apply it in the teaching and learning context. So that's been a really successful way to get people to understand this, at least to start exploring it. But we've also been doing some other interesting things around, we have a learning community that's currently underway. It's a partnership between the Flint campus and the Ann Arbor campus. I'm co-leading it with a colleague from Ann Arbor. And this is for the University of Michigan community. So all 3 campuses, faculty can all participate and learn how to better integrate artificial intelligence into their teaching and learning, which brings us to another exciting point at the University of Michigan. All campuses have access to artificial intelligence within their courses if the faculty chooses to use it. So it's called the Maisie Canvas Connector. And if the faculty member chooses to, it can be integrated into their course. And what happens is that the AI learns from the material that's in the class. And then it's ready to answer questions. And it can only, it's answering questions based on that material, whether it's just the syllabus or a fully formed online course. So I could just ask it a question about, when's this assignment due? And it can give me an answer. Or it could ask me, I'm not understanding this concept, maybe a for loop in a programming course or something like that. And it can explain that based on the materials from the instructor. So they see there's some of the really exciting advancements the university is making right now. And I want to stress that these are all available at any of the campuses of the University of Michigan, including the Flint campus. So I hope everybody comes and joins us in the excitement.
Well, I'm going to let Tim in on this conversation because he's part of that University of Michigan-Flint team as well. New to the party a little bit, but Tim, you have a vast career in the corporate world, GM, Lenovo. Now you're making this transition. One of the things that Nick talked about was this job situation, the future of jobs, concerns by young people.
Yep.
That am I going to have a job? Is AI going to completely take that? Coming from the corporate world, can you give us some perspective? What are your thoughts on that, and what impact AI might have on as you look ahead to jobs in this next century, I guess?
Yeah, well, looking ahead, and just like Nick mentioned, the jobs are going to be taken by the people that understand how to use the tools. Even in the corporate world, if I was still, say, at GM or even at Lenovo, I would be using AI in order to generate documents, memos, meeting notes, take meeting notes, do research. All these things are still going to take place in the near future. They're not going to go away. The jobs, like Nick said before, what's going to go away are the people that don't know how to use the tools the right way. It takes me, when I used to do research at GM, anywhere from 3 to 6 months on a particular subject or topic, depending on how deep I needed to go. With AI, that's minutes now instead of months. Minutes to pull the information together, weeks for me to digest it and be able to articulate what we're going to do with that technology or that information to my leaders. And so companies are going to be looking for that type of critical thinking from our students in the future, going forward. So I usually tell my students, no, it's not going to replace your jobs as long as you learn how to critically think.
And if I could build on what Tim's saying, so I have a real world example of, I was given a task at the university to update some job descriptions for my staff. This is a task that really probably would have taken me several weeks over the summer. But I was thinking about, we did our performance evaluation, so I already have that documentation. And I was able to leverage our internal AI systems to look at their job descriptions, look at what human resources needed us to update, combine those together, and what would have taken me weeks, I actually did on a Friday afternoon. Like, that's the acceleration we are seeing in productivity right now.
So who do you think is taking the lead on AI in terms of innovation and moving it forward? And the academia is going to play a role, the corporate world is going to play a role, people out there that want to do startups are going to play a role. Where do you guys see that all? They all have a role in what we're doing here?
Yes, I think everyone's going to have a role in it, and it's going to help everyone across the board. I don't think it's going to be one particular area. It's going to be all different areas.
Yeah, and Tim had mentioned earlier about DeepSeek being open source. So while I think that, academia and the corporate world is going to be big drivers in innovation, but with the open source versions of these AI systems, it could be you or I that innovates. It could be just somebody that's working in their home figures out, there's a new way to do this, and I'm going to share that with the world via the open source model. So that's another avenue we're going to see.
Are your professors embracing it? You're saying you want to open this to all the courses, all the professors, or is there some pushback?
Sure, there's some pushback, and it's healthy to have some pushback because we need to be thoughtful about these tools for sure. They have inherent issues with them. And so that's why, like, all the materials that we're producing, these innovations that we're producing, we make them available to all the professors, but it's always their choice if they want to actually integrate it. But we are seeing some it's becoming popular, some interest.
Right.
The learning community I mentioned, when we spun this up, we were thinking about, okay, how many people are we going to get? Maybe we'll have 10 people sign up. We had 82 faculty sign up for a learning community that's going to take 6 months for them to complete. So we're definitely seeing some interest.
And some of this is not new when we have any kind of emerging technology, right? We talked about it a little bit before the show. Anytime there's something new, something innovative, there's a pushback, and eventually we all come around. A lot of us fight the process, and maybe we should learn from that, right, Tim?
Oh, definitely. That goes back to one of the things I told my students once was when I was in high school, college, calculators were illegal, and they were told they were going to make you stupid. Same thing that we hear going on with AI today. It's a tool, and today everybody has a calculator within reach of their hands, their watch or their phone now. We use calculators everywhere. It didn't make us dumb. It didn't change anything. It just sped us up, and that's the same thing that AI is going to do.
Yeah, I heard that again last week by some media giant that said, it's just going to make us dumber because we don't have to think anymore. Have you heard that? I'm sure.
Yeah, I've heard that, and I always argue, like what Tim was mentioning earlier, with what we're doing like in the office and productivity. I don't think it's going to make us dumber. It's going to help us say offload some of those menial tasks that are taking up all day and all my time, so that we humans can do more higher order thinking, right? That we can rethink our course materials or the ways we teach or how we assess our students. That's what we need to embrace.
Right.
Let the AI take my notes for me. That's fine.
And in the minute and a half we have, or the 2 minutes, where do you drive viewers? Where do you drive people to get educated, informed? I assume your book and the Godfather of Tech.com and U of M-Flint, but where else can people go to say, hey, I want to look up some things? Where do they go? What do they do?
So I'll recommend at the University of Michigan-Flint, go to www.umflint.edu/GenAI. That's where we keep a lot of our resources.
Tim, help us better understand. Where do I go for resources? Do I just Google it? What are your thoughts?
You can Google it, but I'd say basically my favorite AI right now is Perplexity AI.
That's great.
And the reason I like that one is mainly it does a lot of good research for you and deep research better than all the other ones. One of the things that people don't understand about it is that it actually encompasses Grok, OpenAI, as well as Claude and all the other AIs together. And so you get the best bang for the buck from that standpoint. So if you're going to do research, I'd go that way. And I also like I said, all the stuff that we're doing at the university with our AI stuff. So.
Very good. Well, good information, guys. You were the right people to come on, the experts on this. It's going to continue to change and evolve, but appreciate the information. I think the viewers are taking copious notes, and they'll be much more informed after tonight's show. Tthanks again for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having me.
And that's our show for tonight, but be sure to join us again next Tuesday night right here for the follow-up. Multi-million-dollar investments with cutting-edge technology are calling Mid-Michigan home, but why isn't it getting more attention? Well, they will next week right here on the follow-up. Thanks for joining us tonight. Have a great night. We will see you next week. Well, welcome to the follow-up after show, kind of our web extra, the viewers that watched the big show. And if you watched the big show, it was all about AI. And we brought our guests back again because we've got a heck of a lot more to talk about when you're talking about AI, artificial intelligence. Timothy Bates continues with us virtually, professor at the University of Michigan-Flint in the College of Innovation and Technology, also the Godfather of Tech, godfatheroftech.com. Might want to check that out. Also, Nick Gaspar is staying with us here in studio, professor at the University of Michigan-Flint, director of online and digital education, and adjunct lecturer in the School of Nursing. A few more things to talk about that we didn't get in the big show. Let's start with AI bias. Who wants to start with the bias of AI, right?
I'll let Tim take it.
Oh, well, that's pretty interesting. But the bias in AI, and it's because of how it's programmed. Every application, you write a book, whatever, it's going to be based on the individual that wrote it. And AI itself is based on that. What we're starting to see now, even the bias that we saw beforehand with just American versions, we're seeing worse when we look at the Chinese versions. So when DeepSeek came out, people started complaining that it didn't have a lot of things that were atrocities or things that happened in China that China didn't want to have in their AI. And it was because of their bias of not wanting to put it in their AI. And you're going to see the same thing happen in other countries because their view of the United States is what they understand from our media. Our view from what we understand about their country is from the media. And from that standpoint, that's when we go to program our AIs, that's where the bias comes in. And so how do we remove that is the big question that everybody's being challenged with today, is how do you remove that? One of the things that I was challenged with for the last 12 months, even with OpenAI, is that colleagues, friends of mine would take pictures of me, things that I've written, and say, hey, can you imagine who Tim Bates is? Even I would say the same thing. And it would come out and say, I'm a white male, Caucasian white male. And it's was like, no, it's not. You'd have to go back and reinforce it and say, no, he's an African American male. And that's mainly because of how it was programmed. And so, you know, how do we fix that is we have to basically, what do you call it? I guess go from each other's bias and pull them together some kind of way. But it's not going to go away based on what we see today.
Yeah, to build on what Tim's mentioning, so right in the mid to late 90s, humanity decided to put everything that it knew and all its communication on the internet. And then in 2020 to 2022, OpenAI said, let's train AI on the internet. And we see all these issues that Tim just described. Now there's another, like, I try to be reflective about all this. There's another thing to think about, like with image generation models, when those came around, right? You just ask it to generate a picture. And if you were to go to those early models and say, I need a picture, a stock image of an engineering professor, you're going to probably get an older white man with glasses every time. And if you said, I need a nursing professor, you're going to get a woman. And so that they were doing that because of those inherent biases. Now, as a reflective person, I tend to think like, is this a mirror we need to point back at ourselves and say, did it learn, like, did the universities or did companies in general, or organizations in general, plaster a bunch of white men photographs on their websites and hire a bunch of white people? And then these AI models saw that and go, oh, okay, this is what an engineer looks like.
Huge issue.
Yeah.
But let me add to that real quick, Nick.
Yeah.
I would say you're totally correct on that side, but I look at it from a standpoint of what's not happening is other races are not leaning in. And so when you think about the internet and how we all use the internet, we're all geeks, we're all, technology people, we love this stuff. But when you start talking about the communities and other ethnicities, they don't engage into the internet like most of us do. And that's where that bias has come in. If we get more people to lean in into AI and how it's created and the information that's being put into AI, besides just the boiling of the ocean of everything on the internet, that probably could help solve some of the bias that we have in the AI itself.
Wow, interesting. I'm going to segue to something else.
Yeah.
The loneliness crisis related to AI. Tell me about that.
So, like I've mentioned before, I survey students when I chat with them just to understand how they are using these tools and what they're doing with them. One of the things they do mention is they use it for entertainment. They use it just to have something to chat with. And I like to think, I don't like to think, but I understand that there's a loneliness crisis in our country, especially amongst young people, where at least since COVID, probably earlier, we're just not building relationships like we used to. And one of my fears around this technology in general is that more and more people who are not building those relationships with other people in their communities are turning to these AI tools because they are more human than ever now. And they're just going to be losing that fundamental relationship that they need, like that human element. For example, OpenAI has a new model called Advanced Voice, and it's something that can be used. It sounds incredibly human. It can be used to just ask it quick questions. I have it programmed on my phone, just in my action button. You can use it to simulate interview questions, like you're going on a television show and you're just kind of curious how you should answer questions. You can do that kind of thing.
Huh. Not that you did that.
Yeah,
today,
no. But what's wild is that it sounds human. It stammers sometimes and it breathes. Wow. So that's when I talk about, like, we have this loneliness crisis, plus we have a bunch of young people that are now using these tools. There was a story in the news recently, a young person took their own life because they had a relationship from character.ai and and that whole thing. So that's one of the concerns.
Right.
Yes.
And Tim, I think you mentioned something about there's a religious entity aspect to AI as well.
Yeah, there's several different organizations that have popped up that are basically praying to AIs, and they started with ChatGPT over about 7 months ago. It started popping up in in the streams on the internet, and it's kind of interesting. Like I said, it's like, why? But they think it's just another sentient being because some media or some influencers have pointed them in that direction. So it is a serious issue that we really have to think about. Like Nick said, the loneliness issue as well as the religious issue. Do we want people to start looking at an AI as a entity that they're going to be praying to or taking direction from? You never know where that can go.
Yeah, that's interesting, Tim, because it's like So it's funny how technology is evolving so fast, but our brains just haven't. So we've given ourselves this godlike technology to our human brains, right? So
Sure.
Interesting.
Going to have another area, machine learning.
Yeah.
Can you define what machine learning is?
Yep, so machine learning is how these systems actually learn from the data they're given and then understand how to produce outputs. So think of it like your brain. It's a great way to describe it, I think. So the latest models from OpenAI have 700 billion parameters that they'll use. And you can think of a parameter like a neuron in your brain. And so the way that machines learn, at least in the older systems, was you give it a question, you give it how to answer the question, and then you give it the answer. And then what happens is it's a guessing game for the AI to go, how do I string words together that get the human to understand the answer, right, once it understands it. But the game is changing, especially with DeepSeek and some of these advanced models from OpenAI. We have now what's called reasoning models. So they are doing multi-step reasoning to get to the answer. And a more specific example of that would be you give it a question, you give it an answer, but you force the AI to work out how to get to the answer in the middle. You don't give it the how-to. And what we have found out is that's actually a really more efficient way to train and operate these models than the old system. And it's kind of fun to think about because the way this works is that, so the AI is trying to get to this answer from the question on its own. If it gets it right, you give it a digital cookie. You say, good job, right? But if you get it wrong, you have to correct it. So even the way sometimes humans learn, the robots are learning.
Can you add to that, Tim, at all?
No, that was the perfect example.
Thank you.
Well, then I'll finish up with the last thing. There's this thing, since you guys, the University of Michigan-Flint guys, part of that team, let's finish up the after show, the follow-up after show with the Go Blue app. The Leaders Invest Go Blue app.
Absolutely. So the university is excited to announce that. It was announced earlier this week and launched. The Go Blue app is like an AI system for the University of Michigan. It's available in the App Store for both iOS and Android. And it allows you to just ask it questions. It could be just general questions, and it'll reply to you like ChatGPT would. But it's also focused on what the University of Michigan knows. So if you need what's in the news at the university or sports or anything like that, it can answer those types of questions. And a way that I've already been using it is, let's say I need to drive down to Ann Arbor, and I want to know where's the best place to park to get to the LSA building. It can just tell me what ramp right there to get to, so it's a time saver.
Fantastic. Well, Timothy Bates, Nick Gaspar, professor at University of Michigan-Flint, fantastic conversation, the live show, the after show, great information in this amazing evolving technology. So thank you very much for joining us.
Yep.
Thank you for having me.
Yep, thanks for having me.
And thank you, our viewers, for joining us on the after show.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And make sure to click that bell icon to stay notified when we upload new content. Videos like this are only possible because of viewers like you. To help support this channel, click on the link in the description below. We'll see you next time.